The restaurant went silent. Forks hung in midair, glasses stopped clinking, conversations froze like snapshots in time. At the corner table, under the warm glow of a crystal chandelier, a man with tired eyes and calloused hands placed his palm over his daughter's trembling little fingers. His voice was steady, almost defiant, as he looked directly at the woman across the table. "She's with me." The words rolled across the room like thunder, quiet but commanding, strong yet full of a tenderness that made hearts ache. The billionaire heiress, perfect hair, flawless makeup, diamonds glinting like stars, stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. Nobody had ever spoken to her that way before, not in boardrooms, not at galas, not in the marble halls of her father's empire. She had power, wealth, and influence, but at that moment she had none of it. All she could see was the little girl clinging to her father, and the raw shield of love he had thrown up with just 3 words. That was how it began, the collision of 2 worlds so far apart they should never have touched. Daniel Morales never wanted to sit in that restaurant. A construction foreman by trade, he lived paycheck to paycheck, carrying the weight of both provider and parent after tragedy struck 3 years earlier. His wife, Emily, had died in a car accident on a rainy night. Since then, Daniel's life revolved around raising their daughter, Lily. Lily was 7 now, with curly brown hair that always seemed to escape her braids, and a laugh so pure it could melt even Daniel's hardest days. But Lily was fragile. She had been diagnosed with a congenital heart condition that required constant monitoring, hospital visits, and, soon, a surgery that Daniel could barely afford. Bills stacked higher every month, and Daniel worked overtime until his body ached, never once letting Lily see how close he came to breaking. It was Lily's doctor who invited them to the charity gala that night. The event raised funds for pediatric heart research, and families of patients were asked to attend. Daniel almost declined, embarrassed by the thought of showing up in his only suit, frayed at the cuffs. But Lily had begged, her wide eyes sparkling at the idea of wearing the blue dress her grandma had sewn. "Please, Daddy," she said, "I want to go somewhere fancy. Just once." So he went. For her. That was how they ended up across from Isabella Hayes, the only daughter of billionaire real estate magnate Charles Hayes. Isabella was used to a world of silk tablecloths and 10-course meals. She attended events not out of joy, but because she was expected to represent the Hayes name. But tonight was different. When she saw Lily shyly adjusting her little dress, something stirred inside Isabella. She couldn't look away. The child reminded her of something long buried, innocence, longing, the childhood she had never truly known. Her mother had left when she was young, and her father, though present in name, had been emotionally absent. The nannies and tutors had raised her body, but not her heart. So when she overheard whispers from a nearby donor, belittling Daniel's presence, "What's a man like that doing here? He doesn't belong among us," Isabella felt anger. That was the first time she spoke to Daniel. But what began as curiosity quickly turned into a clash. Daniel, fiercely protective, mistook her interest for pity. He bristled at her questions, his pride refusing to let anyone treat him as a charity case. Isabella, unused to being dismissed, pushed harder, until someone suggested Lily might have better opportunities if Isabella stepped in. That was when Daniel's hand gripped his daughter's tighter, his jaw set, and he declared, "She's with me." The words echoed longer in Isabella's heart than in the room. She had never seen such unshakable devotion. It wasn't wealth or influence that protected Lily, it was love, raw and unpolished, the kind Isabella had craved all her life. From that night, their lives became intertwined. Isabella reached out again, not out of pity, but genuine concern. She offered resources, connections, medical advice from specialists abroad. Daniel refused at first, his pride a wall. But Lily, ever perceptive, adored Isabella. She called her Miss Bella, and her innocent laughter softened Daniel's resistance. Challenges came quickly. The first was trust. Daniel wrestled with his fear of letting anyone too close, terrified of Lily growing attached to someone who might walk away. Isabella struggled with her own world. Her father disapproved of her involvement with a construction worker. Yet every time she tried to step back, she remembered Lily's hand slipping into hers, the little girl whispering, "I like when you're here." The second challenge was the looming surgery. Doctors explained Lily's heart could not wait much longer. Daniel was faced with an impossible choice, a procedure in the city that was less costly but riskier, or the advanced treatment abroad that gave Lily her best chance, yet far beyond his reach. Isabella quietly began making arrangements, determined to cover the costs, but Daniel found out and confronted her. "I don't need your money," he snapped. "This isn't about you," Isabella replied, tears in her eyes. "This is about her, about Lily." The argument cut deep. For Daniel, it was about dignity, the fear of being seen as less of a man. For Isabella, it was about purpose, the chance to finally give the love she'd never been able to share. It was Lily who bridged the gap. One night, as Daniel tucked her in, she whispered, "Daddy, Miss Bella makes you smile when you forget to. Can she stay, just until my heart is better?" The simplicity of her words broke Daniel's defenses. He realized then that accepting help was not weakness, it was love too. Together, Daniel and Isabella fought for Lily's future. They faced criticism, whispers in Isabella's circles about her, lowering herself, warnings from Daniel's coworkers who said he was setting himself up for heartbreak. But through every trial, they found strength in the bond forming between them. When the day of Lily's surgery came, the sterile white walls of the hospital echoed with fear and hope. Daniel paced endlessly, his hands trembling, his lips moving in silent prayers. Isabella stayed by his side, grounding him when his world threatened to unravel. Hours passed until finally, the surgeon emerged with a tired smile. The surgery was a success. Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he collapsed into a chair, relief overwhelming him. Isabella's tears mirrored his, though hers carried gratitude, that she had been allowed into this sacred part of their lives. The weeks that followed were filled with recovery, laughter, and healing. Lily grew stronger, her cheeks flushed with color, her laughter filling the small apartment like sunlight. She drew pictures of herself, her daddy, and Miss Bella, with hearts drawn around them. And in time, the walls around Daniel's heart crumbled. He saw Isabella not as the heiress from another world, but as the woman who knelt beside Lily's bed, who learned to braid curly hair, who brought homemade soup despite never having cooked before. She was no longer someone who didn't belong, she was someone who had found where she belonged. Their greatest challenge was not money, nor surgery, but choosing love despite fear. For Isabella, it meant defying her world. For Daniel, it meant risking his heart again. One evening, as they sat on the worn couch in Daniel's apartment, Lily asleep in her room, Isabella leaned her head against his shoulder. The silence between them was comfortable, built on shared storms. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly. Daniel looked down at her, his hand covering hers. "Every day, but for the first time in a long time, I don't think about it alone." Isabella smiled, tears glimmering. She didn't need diamonds or palaces. She had finally found what her billions could never buy, a family, a place where she was wanted not for her name, but for her heart. And Daniel, the man who once believed love was something he'd lost forever, realized he had gained more than he could ever imagine. Because sometimes, love doesn't come in the ways we expect. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet strength of a father's voice, declaring for the world to hear, "She's with me." And sometimes, it stays, turning broken pieces into something whole, something lasting, something worth everything. The message was clear. True strength isn't in wealth or pride, but in the courage to love, to accept love, and to fight for it, no matter where it comes from.